One of the best features of our Plant Strong Meal Planner is the ability to search recipes that allow you to use random ingredients from your pantry or your fridge. Our 5-minute chana masala is a super popular recipe using canned beans, diced tomatoes, frozen brown rice, and spices. It's an easy solution to the what's for dinner dilemma that everybody has. Members can search our database of hundreds of whole food, plant-based, oil-free recipes and find delicious ways to use up what you have on hand while staying plant strong. And if you need help making ingredient substitutions, guess what? Our meal planner coaches are on hand 7 days a week. Save $20 off the annual plan and use the code HEALTHNOW. That's one word, HEALTHNOW. And visit plantstrong.com and click on the meal planner today. All right, today we are serving up on the Plant Strong podcast a little dose of plant-based meat. Just like me, today's guest was inspired by his dad to change the world and have a lasting positive impact on health and the environment. I'm talking about Ethan Brown, the founder and CEO of Beyond Meat, a disruptive and innovative plant-based meat company. And I know you've seen and heard of them because they are ubiquitous these days. This interview was recorded pre-COVID-19, so while we don't specifically discuss it, this episode is very timely since, as you've, I'm sure, read, one of the areas most affected by this horrific disease is our food supply chain, specifically the animal food supply chain. The conditions are deplorable for both the animals and the humans at these meat processing plants, and the health of both is compromised daily. Ethan discusses in detail how his company is improving the efficiency, the safety, the health, and the environmental impact of his Beyond Meat production. And the benefits are huge. We know that the average consumer, even those who eat animal meat, are aware and very concerned about these health and social issues. As Ethan says, I believe there is a new dawn for American agriculture, and this conversation is our awakening hour. In fact, just last week, Jim Cramer, the host of Mad Money on CNBC, said that Beyond Meat is a small company, but so was Amazon, so was Facebook, and so was Google. And then he goes on to say, and I quote, "It's all going Beyond Meat's way." And what is Beyond Meat doing? They're cutting prices. I think the pandemic is saying, start eating plant-based. Kramer continues to go on to say that the rising demand for plant-based protein will not be a passing fad, and that there's no hobby here. The hobby is going to end up being meat. Oh man, Jim, you are talking our language. I think the pandemic is saying start eating plant-based. Eating meat's going to become a hobby. Love it. Here's to having the heart of a hero and not being afraid to challenge the status quo. In fact, instead of being divisive, it's time we collectively come together and work to solve these problems on behalf of the animals, the longevity of our planet, and our own health. It is my mission, and it's the mission and driving force for my friend Ethan Brown. All right, here we are, season 2 of the Plant Strong podcast. I am here with Ethan Brown, the CEO of Beyond Meat. And I want you to know, and I'm at world headquarters for Beyond Meat. Where exactly are we?
So we're in El Segundo, California.
All right, El Segundo, like what, 2 miles from the airport?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this was the easiest drive I've ever made.
Yeah.
from the airport. And season 2, just so you know, the whole theme is Heart of a Hero. Okay. And we're really, I'm trying to identify people that are changing the game. And that's who we're having and inviting on season 2 of the podcast. And you, probably more than just about anybody I know, are changing the game in a multitude of ways. And I want to get into that. So you are truly a game changer.
Thank you.
Now, speaking of the game changers, have you seen the movie?
I have. And before I even get into that, I mean, I just want to share on the podcast the impact you and your family have had on my own life and just how much of a fan I am of yours. I mean, it's incredibly sincere. I watched Forks Over Knives more times than I can count, shared it with more people than I can count. When we got a chance to connect a few years back, it was a terrific thing for me. I mean, I've been a big fan of yours for a long time. So it's great to be here being interviewed by you. That's kind of surreal.
Well, I am flattered. Thank you. And so in the Game Changers, you saw it.
Yeah.
Did you like it?
I love that movie. Yes. In fact, you're so intimately involved with it, but I'm having to stop myself from showing you a clip because it's something I do almost every time someone comes to my office interested in this subject. But of course, that would be lost on you because you made it together. Yeah.
Set the record for most downloads of a documentary ever, and they broke it in a little over a week.
It's remarkable, and it resonates so strongly with me for so many of the reasons that it also resonates with you, of course. But even as someone who's building a business, it was really important for me to see this. You and I growing up, we were very much exposed to the Got Milk campaign. I mean, that was something that was a big part of culture and maybe less so today. But the use of athletes to promote a particular type of animal-based protein was something the California Milk Board did very, very well. And that was something that, because of my own background and interest in the milk industry, because what my family was doing, I paid a lot of attention to the Got Milk campaign. So it came time for me to start my own company. I actually hired the original sponsor of that campaign, a guy named Jeff Manning on the California Milk Board. He had left since then. I was consulting.
And you grew up on a dairy farm?
I actually grew up in the city. But my dad's a professor, and he didn't like being in the city, and so he wanted to have a place to go recreate because he grew up in the country. And so we got a farm very early on in my childhood, and he's kind of an entrepreneurial. So ultimately, we had Holstein cattle there, dairy. Yeah, but at any rate, so I went back and found the person who wrote the original sort of mandate for the Got Milk campaign. It was someone named Jeff Manning on the California Milk Board. And that led to that campaign with the Milk Mustache and Bo Jackson, Derek Jeter, et cetera. And so I asked him to come work with me. And so we worked together for a number of years, creating the Future Protein campaign that we have here and the Go Beyond campaign. And it's been remarkable. A woman named Beth Moskowitz has brought in more athletes than I can count. Really remarkable. Whether it's Kyrie Irving or DeAndre Jordan, DeAndre Hopkins, Chris Paul, all of them. They are now getting behind the idea that a plant-based diet is the best for performance, and so Game Changers just nails that.
Yeah, and there's a scene in there with the Tennessee Titan football players, and Chastity Morgan is cooking, I think, some burgers on a grill. Are those Beyond Meat burgers?
They are, yes. Yeah, we love the Morgans and all they're doing, and I think that's just a great story. And you're seeing that proliferate throughout the NFL, and particularly NBA, where lightness and quickness is so important. You're seeing so many NBA athletes turn to a plant-based diet for no other reason than to improve their performance. Yeah. Now, they also love the social aspect of it. They love the disruptive challenger. Let's not do things the way we used to do them. Let's bring something forward in this world that's a little better for their kids.
Right. Let's challenge the status quo.
Yeah. There's a big part of that. Yeah.
So you said something that just kind of, I think, to me, epitomizes kind of you and why you've been able to do what you've done with Beyond Meat since its inception in 2009. Mm-hmm. And that is, you went after the guy that basically created the Milk Mustache campaign, right?
Yeah.
I mean, who better to go after?
Yes.
And you had no reservations about reaching out to this guy and saying, hey, you know what? I want to do something big. And I mean, you just go for gusto, huh?
Well, it's so much. I mean, part of the reason that your story and your family's story, is so important to me, and is that we all come from a particular background, and I grew up eating a ton of meat, I grew up drinking a lot of milk and having meat and everything else, and I didn't think of myself as a bad person then, or someone who was making the wrong choices or something like that, and so I don't want to hold someone else in judgment today if they're making a decision that's different from the one that I've decided to make, right? And so I try to pitch the biggest tent possible because I think we're all at different points on our journey, and so whether it's working with Tyson, which was not something that was that well received by a lot of people, but it was important to me, or working with the folks from the Got Milk campaign. The idea is, how do you affect change as quick as you can versus, I think it's probably fun to wear a black turtleneck and hang out at a party and, throw stones at various people or industries, but it's more effective to work with them for change. And that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And in doing my research for this podcast, I'm amazed how you do everything you can to bring people together and not be divisive. Yeah. And I think it's a beautiful model, and it's one that's worked really well for you.
Thank you. It has. And if you look at the people that are buying our product, for example, so we have data from the nation's largest grocer. I think I know it's Kroger. And 93% of the consumers that are putting the Beyond Burger in their cart are also putting an animal protein in their cart, right? And so that's where change happens, and so. If you look at Tyson, for example, Tyson touches, I think, 40% of the plates in the United States, right? So how do you get to a point where you can have the most impact the most quickly? Yeah. And that's through working in the mainstream.
Yeah. No, again, it's like, it's like the milk mustache. You go, let's see if we can do something with Tyson, right? I mean, you go right like for the jugular in a positive way.
Yeah. And, what's so interesting to me is just the history. People talk about disruption a lot, and it's a word that's used up north in Silicon Valley, overused for sure. And it's one thing to disrupt, for, let's say, the VHS to come along, or Beta, which was then obviously lost, but the motion picture industry or the mobile phone to disrupt the landline. It's a whole nother thing to think about displacing a vehicle that we've used since before we were humans. Before we became Homo sapiens, we were consuming animal protein, right? So to say, you can still have a piece of meat and enjoy it and have a great meal, but it's just going to come from plants, not from an animal. That's a much more difficult disruption to affect. And so you got to be really smart about it. And we try to dress ourselves in the nomenclature and in the traditions of animal protein, including the use of male athletes, to promote it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you used the word disrupted.
Yeah.
And I want to read a little section from the letter that you wrote to the Securities and Exchange Commission right before the IPO of Beyond Meat. And that is, we seek to become the first generation of humans to separate meat from animals, unlocking the next era in the American story of innovation, disruption, and growth. So you just gave me some examples of other disruptors in the past. You say in this, separate meat from animals. I find that absolutely, that caught my eye immediately, and I think it begs the question: what is meat?
Yeah.
And so, according to you, what is meat?
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking that. And that statement is one that I think about all the time, and I think about it in terms of my life's work and what I want to have accomplished, when it's all said and done. And if I can be part of a generation of people that actually does have the impact of separating meat from animals, I think that's something that is an achievement on an evolutionary scale in terms of what it could do for our species and for the rest of the species we share this earth with. And
I think most people are thinking, how can you create meat without having an animal as part of the equation?
So this is fascinating. So I'm reading this book, which I'm only halfway through, but it's called What is Life? And I'm reading it for a number of reasons, but it's by Margolis and Sagan. And it really tries to find that point in time when life first began on Earth, right? And it's fascinating. And what you learn from reading texts like this is that we're all coming from the same things. We're all coming from the same basic elements, right? And they just ladder up throughout the ecosystem and into our bodies and who we are and the material we're made from. But there's no real separation. We're all coming from the same sort of soup, right? And so if you think about meat, you can, and I think, and to the detriment of ourselves and the earth, insist that it comes from an animal. You can say meat has to come from a chicken, cow, pig, or pick your favorite livestock. Or you can instead try to define meat by its composition, and that's what we do at Beyond Meat. So we look at the composition of meat, and we've studied this probably more than anyone in the world in terms of trying to understand what makes meat. And it really boils down to 5 things at a high level. It's amino acids.
Now, I'm going to stop you right there.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people don't know what amino acids are.
Sure.
So
sure.
What when you say amino acids, what is that?
Sure. It's an assembly of amino acids that create protein, right? And so you want to have a certain level of amino acids in your diet, and a protein score is limited by the most efficient amino acid in that particular batch, right? So the more kind of higher levels of amino acid you can get, the higher protein score you get. And
right.
so so I could say it differently. I could say meat is essentially protein, it's lipids or fat, and then it's
hold on. No.
Yeah.
Okay. So and lipids.
Yep.
Now I know but I'm going to stop you because I want everybody to understand.
Sure.
All right. Because you've done this a million times, right?
Yeah.
But so amino acids basically are, kind of the building blocks of the proteins.
Yep.
9 are considered like essential, right?
We can't
meaning we can't manufacture them. Lipids, what are lipids?
Yeah, so basically fats, right?
Okay.
And so we've done a lot to separate out fats and make oils and things like that, but they also are inherent in plants, right? And so that's what's so fascinating about this work is that nothing that I'm about to describe, which makes the composition of meat, is exclusive to the animal, right? And think what the animal's doing. They're consuming vegetation and they're drinking water. They're using their biology, their digestive tract, their skeletal muscular system to create muscle, which we then harvest as meat, right?
In that same letter, you refer to them as a bioreactor.
They really are. Yeah. I mean, that's not how they would think of themselves for sure.
Right.
They have their own lives and ends and goals and things like that. But yeah, for the purpose of agriculture, they are a bioreactor. They're a conversion mechanism of plant material and water into something we call meat, right? And so you take a step back and you think about, okay, what is that core composition? And it's that protein, then it's that fat, right? And then it's essentially trace minerals and it's trace vitamins, and then it's predominantly water, just like our bodies. And this is an area which I have just learned a tremendous amount. I had this sense when I was a kid, like many people, that we're all related to each other in terms of animals and people. It all made sense, that we came from the same place. But it wasn't until I really read Darwin and began to understand that we all evolved. We didn't descend from the heavens onto earth, right? We ascended from mud. And when you go through that ascension, you share so many common traits with the rest of the species on earth. And that's why I'm so troubled by the factory farm systems we have, because those are our distant relatives. I mean, that, like, biologically, that's the case. We said 80% of our DNA is the same as genetic material is in cows, is the same as in humans. There's a big connection, and that's why we feel a sense of connection to animals in a way that we do. But I think our theology and our just the many different frameworks we use to differentiate animals from humans have that point has been lost in that, and that's unfortunate. Yeah, but anyway, I digress.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's so true. I mean, I look at my kids, and they have no earthly understanding why humans eat these animals that, as children, we're reading about how much we love them, and Charlotte's Web and the Big Red Barn, and now we're basically taking them apart and eating them.
So I can tell you, I use that Charlotte's Web all the time, and I love that book, and I have a pig named Wilbur. But I did that because I wanted my own children to have the same experience I had, which was to go to this farm all the time and to have to ask those questions. And I've used that text, that book, which is so great, by E.B. White, that to say, I never had anyone with my dad. My dad never said to me, son, this is the way it is. He just didn't ever say that to me. He said, well, you sort of have to figure it out yourself. Like, the animals in the barn, are they different from the animals in the house? So I struggled with that as a kid, right? And I think today most kids don't have exposure to how their food is made, so they don't ask those questions, right? But a generation is coming up that, because of videos and documentaries, Forks Over Knives being the one that I always think of, kids are now being exposed to things they weren't in the past, and it's making them more capable of making informed decisions around the plate.
Yeah. I'm just struck right now in listening to you talk. It sounds like you're a voracious reader.
I do like to read a lot.
Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
Yeah. That's very cool.
Well, and that's one of the things that we were just talking about earlier this morning. I'm worried about the generation coming up. While they are very attuned to, we've talked about this, you and I speak in some of the same places. You go to university, and the kids there are super excited about this idea that you don't need an animal to produce meat. Like, they really get excited. I always ask them, why are you so excited about this? Well, I saw a documentary. I saw Forks Over Knives. I saw What the Health. Excited now, soon will be Game Changers. but they're not mentioning I read Upton Sinclair. They're not mentioning Francis LePay. Like, so it's a different generation. We got to be careful that we don't lose the written word.
Mm-hmm. You, in that same letter to the SEC, you also mention how the greatest bottleneck, right. in agriculture is the animal.
Yeah.
And another thing that I read, this study, this person says, I believe there is a new, no, that's you actually right there. It's the industrial livestock industry is one of the oldest, largest, and most inefficient food production systems in the world. Yeah. And your statement about it being the bottleneck absolutely affirms
It's remarkable, and this is why I feel so passionate about the economic opportunity for the farmer, and really, I'm going up to Alberta soon to meet with members of the Canadian Cattlemen's Association, because I think this whole thing that the media is trying to do, casting us versus them, is it's a red herring. Mm-hmm. There's an opportunity to bring, as I mentioned in that letter, innovation to agriculture that is unprecedented, I think. I think if you look at the big step forward in American agriculture, there's been several, but one of them was the initial one was the advent of the combine and the mechanization of the combine and the yields that increased from the fields. And then you have other things that we layered in, fertilizers, et cetera. So we made the fields extremely efficient. The output, the yield per field, per acre over the last 100 years has just been mind-boggling, right? Now, what do we do with all that yield? We run it through what? An animal. Has the animal evolved that much? Sure. We've made the animal bigger, right? We've grown them faster. But every time, and I'm sympathetic to this, because if you put a group of engineers together and you say, how do you make this system as efficient as you can? One of the things you're going to look at is the size of the animal. They're going to say, let's just make the animal bigger. Let's have them expend less energy, things like that. But the consumer pushes back. Consumer's like, we don't want gestation crates. We don't want field crates. We don't want battery caged hens, right? So there's a limit to the efficiency that the consumer is willing to accept. And I think we're at the peak efficiency of the animal. And now it's time to essentially unpack all that and capture all the efficiency we've gotten at the field level and put it directly on the plate. That's what we do. We say the fields have become really efficient. Let's skip that process of running it through an animal. Let's run it through heating, cooling, and pressure, which, by the way, is how we make our products, and put it to the center of the plate.
You may have seen Wild Earth Dog Food on Shark Tank, where the founder, Ryan, shared how he felt there was a better way to feed our pets, to help the environment, and to save the lives of needlessly slaughtered animals. I am thrilled that we partnered with Wild Earth because they are in complete alignment with our values and are changing the way people think about nutrition for their pets. If you love your dog as much as I love our dog Jade, and you want to try Wild Earth, please visit wildearth.com or amazon.com and use the code PLANTSTRONG for 40% off your first order. I've got a lot of questions about your products and where you are with them right now. But before I go there, because I think people will be fascinated. So, why did you start Beyond Meat, and what was your background before Beyond Meat?
Sure. So we talked a little bit about my childhood and just that exposure to agriculture and not being told to think one way or the other about it. My dad is a philosopher, and so that was sort of not what he would do. And so I sort of came out of my childhood asking these questions, but didn't do anything about them. I made some decisions about my own diet, became vegetarian, things like that, and then later vegan. But I didn't, think about a career in this space. I instead, I remember getting out of school and out of college and talking to my dad about what I should be doing in my career. And he asked a really interesting question. He asked me, what do you view as the greatest problem in the world? And I thought about it and came back and said,
what a question for your father to ask.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was really great. I can remember it very clearly. And I said, well, I think it's climate, because if we don't have a stable climate, the rest doesn't matter. I can do great missionary work, but if
So you said the climate, and how long ago was that?
This was in the mid-90s.
Mid-90s, yeah, you were thinking about the climate.
Yeah, I really was. It was stuff had started to kind of percolate. Gore was starting to sound make some noise there, And so to me, I felt that a career that focused on technology that would allow for climate change solutions was an important one. And so I went in sort of blindly, just sort of followed the herd in the sense, okay, well, if you want to do something there, go into alternative energy, right? So solar, wind, et cetera. So I ultimately ended up working I joined as a kind of entry-level position at a company called Ballard Power Systems, and was just very passionate and successful there. I reported up to the CEO eventually, and enjoyed that a lot. It was a super rewarding career, and we were owned at one point by Ford and Daimler Chrysler at the time, and publicly traded. It was an exciting time, but it wasn't scratching any itch that I had, and that itch was really around. I began to understand that livestock actually played a larger role than automotive in greenhouse gas emissions. And then I had this love for the outdoors and love for animals. And it wasn't until later that I really began to understand the health benefits too. Right. And so all of a sudden, these things came to me where I could focus on one thing, and it was that protein at the center of the plate. And I'd never seen anything like this in my career ever, where by focusing on one thing, you could simultaneously impact 4 really important global problems. So human health, the work that you guys made so clear in Forks Over Knives and other work. Yeah. Heart disease, diabetes, cancer, the relationship between that and animal protein consumption. And then you look at things like climate, where it's, again, that big driver I just talked about. And you look at natural resources, land, energy, water, and then ultimately animal welfare.
Yeah.
And I say, okay, well, if I can just figure out a way to build a piece of meat without using an animal, I could affect all 4 of those things. Then you actually start to study the composition of meat and say, wait a minute, this isn't just exclusive to the animal, it's outside the animal as well. The animal is essentially an organizing mechanism for us. But why keep using that? We have evolved to, whether it's, people talk about the horse-drawn carriage or the automobile, there's so many examples where we have basically said, let's take something good and make it better. We don't have to demonize meat, let's just make it better, right? And that's what we're about here.
Are you pleased with where you are right now? Did you ever dream that you would be where you are right now when you started this in 2009?
I don't know that I had this outcome in mind, and I think we're really blessed and fortunate that the consumers move so quickly. Like that surprised me, right? Yeah. That for the longest time, and you've experienced this in your own work, you're pushing and convincing, and it's constantly trying to run uphill, and then all of a sudden the dam broke, and people said this is something we want. And I think what we're tapping into at Beyond Meat is something where there's a I love eating meat. I don't anymore. Obviously, I don't eat animal meat, and I haven't for a long time. But I know there's some issues that surround it, whether the health or environment, animal welfare, et cetera. So I'm sort of if I'm a normal consumer, an average consumer, I want to keep eating meat, but I'm beginning to become really aware of the social issues around it, right, and the health issues around it. And so Beyond Meat provides a way out, right? You can sort of continue to consume the dishes you love, right? But you don't have to use an animal to do that, and that sort of frees people, I think, to make better decisions, and that excites them. And so we benefited from the consumer, your work and the work of so many different universities and institutions talking about the impact of animal protein and health are driving the consumer in this direction, and they're looking for a solution, and we're providing that.
No, here's a quote of yours. I believe there is a new dawn for American agriculture, and this conversation is our awakening hour. I mean, to me, what you have done with Beyond Meat in catapulting these conversations, right? And I mean, the fact that this was probably the most talked about IPO in years, right? Yeah. I mean, it is spectacular. We got the game changers coming out, right? Yeah. So we got we have a confluence of a lot of factors hitting at once. It's beautiful. Yep. How big is the Beyond Meat team at this point? How many employees?
We're about 400 folks, and people ask the question the other day, do you want to keep collaborating with the Tysons and JBSs of the world and things like that? And I think that period for us is over. I think the more appropriately we want to be them. Right. We want to be a global protein company. So you're going to see us be very aggressive in Asia, very aggressive in the EU, and of course, the partnerships we have today, I can scarcely believe. Like if you look at, I can't. Like
who are some of those partnerships?
So we're testing with McDonald's.
Yeah.
We just rolled out nationally with Dunkin'. You look at KFC.
Is Dunkin' the Tom Hortons in America, basically?
Yeah, they would like be upset about that. Yeah, but yes.
Yeah.
I mean, and I love Dunkin'. I mean, it's just a great iconic brand. You know, I love going there with my family and stuff, and so to be able to go there and get a Beyond Breakfast sausage, which is probably in my view, our best product. It certainly it kills it on health. I mean, it's just amazing. It has like more protein, more iron. It has less sodium, less saturated fat, and less total fat than pork.
Yeah.
But it's cool too. It has protein from sunflower seeds, from mung bean, brown rice, and pea protein. So as we talked about earlier, when you combine all those amino acids, you get a really high protein score. And so I just love it.
So I want to disrupt. Just make a statement, because what you just said there, it's got mung bean protein. It's got whatever other proteins you said. So the fact is that you can use different plant proteins to create a different product.
Yeah.
Is super, super cool. It's not just always pea protein.
See, so that's where I am on this. So I really feel strongly about this. And so we're in the Manhattan Beach Project, by the way, which is the center here that we use for research, and we use that for that name because we're near Manhattan Beach, but more importantly because of the Second World War and the idea you bring together the best scientists, best engineers, best managers, give them a clear goal and kind of get out of their way. Right?
Yep.
But infuse the place with urgency. Everything about this place is urgent, right? And I think we have a global crisis, right? So we have to solve it, right? And so we got to be urgent. But it's pea protein is a protein. There's nothing particularly special about peas.
Right.
It's here because it's the isolated protein and the concentrated protein is here because of the starch industry largely. They needed to get starch from peas for glass noodles in Asia. 20 years ago, someone said, let's start making the protein available in the market. I started using it back in 2010 and playing around with it. And it's funny, I couldn't get the texture right on it. So I for a while, I just ate it as cereal. I would put like soy milk and then peas, and it was great, actually. It's like these sort of dried, but anyway. So, but once you start to think about the plant kingdom and stop thinking about, okay, what plants do I grow to run through animals to build meat? Instead, what plants do I grow to build meat directly from? Then all of a sudden, it's thousands of crops, and you can pull protein. I mean, like I really dream of the day when you can go to a supermarket and go to the meat aisle, and you can get lentil-based sausage. You can get lupin-based sausage,
right.
And it's different varieties. And I can tell you the farmer that grew them. We can tell that story. And,
No, it's fascinating. And you think right now we're limited by.
It drives me crazy.
Beef, chicken, pork, and maybe 2 or 3 others, right?
Yeah.
But what you're talking about right now, it's infinite.
Yeah, and I've been begging our supply chain, and this is where I just get frustrated, to diversify, right? We'll look at it, but it's reactive. They're looking backwards instead of forwards. And so there are some good companies, chickpea separation, et cetera, but we should be separating protein from hundreds of crops and providing it. When we're selling in China, I'll be really frustrated if we're selling, North American peas there versus something that's been grown there, right?
Right.
We need to make sure that we're diverse.
How many different products do you have right now?
So we always iterate around 3 core categories, and they're beef, pork, and poultry, and that's a $1.4 trillion industry if you add those together globally. And so we focus the most, and this is really your dad's work. We focus the most on red meat because of the clear discussions there around red meat and things like heart disease, et cetera.
Yeah.
And that's where the consumer's pulling away most dramatically in everything we see. And then you look at, so we have the burger with the Beyond Burger, and then we have the Beyond Beef, which is a 1 pound ground. And then you look at pork, and that's where consumers are starting to pull away from processed meat, right? And so we have the Beyond Sausage. We just launched this Beyond Breakfast Sausage with Dunkin' that'll be coming to retail next year. And then in poultry, we did the work with KFC, and you'll see some stuff from us later on that. Yeah.
I mean, when I saw you at the Expo West just a couple months ago, literally, I just wanted a sample of, I think it was the Beyond Meat sausage.
Yeah.
It took me 15 minutes to get a sample because the line was so long.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's
so exciting.
Yeah, it speaks volumes.
But here's where the movement has come. Like, this is incredible to me. So, we every year, like 5 or 6 years ago, we would do, at Expo West, we would take the logo and the signage and everything of a popular fast food restaurant, and we would turn it slightly. but it was very clear, like McDonald's, we turned it on its side and made it into a B, but everything else looked like McDonald's. And we get a cease and desist letter from them. And they'd send it to us on Saturday, but you know how the show works, right? It's like, it's already over on Sunday. So we're like, sure, we'll comply. And we did that with, Taco Bell and many others, In-N-Out, et cetera. And to go from that sort of challenger position to one now where you're working in partner with them every day with their supply chains, with them asking the right questions, with them looking to serve this consumer, it's a blessing I can't even describe.
Yeah. So since you started this in 2009, how many iterations of, let's just say, of the burger would you say you've gone through between then and now in 2019?
Oh, thousands.
Thousands.
Yeah, and we'll continue to do that. We will continue to do that. Yeah, I mean, we have tastings almost every day here. I know I have one later today. And we're brutal. You have to be really honest about the quality of products. And I'll be honest, in public, like our products aren't there yet. They're not indistinguishable. Now, if you do, I had a bolognese.
Indistinguishable from what?
Animal protein. Yeah.
So is your goal to have it be that Beyond Meat is basically, you can't tell the difference between a beef burger and a Beyond Meat burger?
It is my goal, and here's why.
Yeah.
I just know that humans, the vast majority, particularly in the West and emerging economies now as they gain influence, love the taste of animal protein and the satiating experience of it. And so I'd rather go after a target that I fully understand than one that I have to guess at. Yeah. And so my mother is always after me and says, why don't you just create a great center of the plate protein that people love and don't identify with any particular type of animal protein? I think we have to earn the right to get there. So I think someday we will do that. But first, let's show that this statement is true, that you can build a piece of meat directly from plants. I want to prove that out and then be able to have some freedom to operate.
That's, what's so interesting about that is, so I personally, I've been eating what I call Plant Strong now for 32 years.
Yeah, love it. Yeah. And you look like you've been doing it. You look great. Yeah.
And the thought of eating something that is that familiar with a piece of meat is it's too much for me.
100%.
But what you said just earlier about how 93% of Americans basically grocery carts, they're eating both, right?
Yes.
So I mean, that's you're obviously doing the right thing.
Well, it's funny. My daughter says the same thing you said. There's some of our products which she doesn't like to eat because they are too meat-like for her, right? But I think it's really that vast majority of the consumers that still want that taste.
Very briefly, what is the difference in the environmental impact between a regular burger and the Beyond Meat burger? And I know you guys commissioned a study at the University of Michigan.
And we did that because there's a lot of noise. You go to Expo West and there's a ton of just crazy claims being made. So we wanted to really be academic about it and have facts at our side. And so we had the University of Michigan do a peer-reviewed study for us. It was someone who had done a lot of work with the livestock industry, so not necessarily sympathetic to our position, but not anti-sympathetic either. And so they did a very exhaustive analysis of our whole supply chain. So we use 93% less land, right? We use 99% less water. We have 90% fewer emissions, and we use half the energy. So that land, that's where I really focus on in terms of just helping the farmer understand this. We started the business back in Appalachia. We started in right outside our farm in Maryland, and that community was being devastated and still is up and down that, whether it's Ohio, Maryland, Pennsylvania, by opioids, by a lack of economic development in the rural community. And, it's gotten so bad where it's like people just putting in prisons just to create jobs, right? And so my belief is that if we can go back and make the case to the farmer that if they're growing if they have 100 acres and they're currently growing corn, soy, and wheat on that for animal feed, think about the efficiency. If we are using 93% less land, now they can grow the same amount of burgers in 7 acres. They used to grow in 100, right? Let's talk to them about that and what they do with that land that's been freed up.
Nice.
Yeah, they're finding resources this way, right?
Yeah.
And so let's bring economic development back to the farmer.
I mean, right there, that's a slam dunk.
It's great, right?
I mean,
yeah, and it's also, there's something about what I love is seeing the younger farmers get behind this. Like it's just to see the generational change.
Yeah.
This is not about making tough choices where you're going to hurt your family. You're going to help your family grow.
Yeah. So what's been the reaction when you've gone around and you've talked to some of these farmers and and maybe they're hearing this for maybe, I don't know, first time. I mean,
Right.
are they like receptive to it?
Some are. It really depends. Again, the younger ones are definitely receptive, but it's still early, and there's a lot of noise in the system. We got to get the noise out and get some data together. So, yeah.
Okay, I've heard you say that, in order for, I think, Beyond Meat to be successful, you got to nail it in three different categories.
Very important. Yeah.
So, and I want to talk just about
Sure.
each one of these.
Sure.
So the first is taste and sensory.
Yeah.
Second is nutrition,
Yeah.
and the third is price.
Yeah.
So let's start with taste and sensory. I feel like you've kind of talked about that. You're in relentless pursuit of something that is just like meats, right?
Yeah.
How long do you think till you're there?
Yeah. I'd say it depends on the product, but with something like the burger or ground beef, I'd say we're within a few years of that, of having something that's indistinguishable. But here's the thing that
No. So what are you not happy with?
oh man, there's a couple things that are really hard to do. So one is the flavor of meat comes from literally almost, I think, 3,000 different molecules has been identified by our team and by others. And so
you have flavor or aroma or both?
Both, yeah. So the aroma and the taste come from this basically this combination of molecules and compounds that release under heat and things like that. And so,
it's funny. So you say that, and I'm thinking, okay, so bacon is cooking, and it's bacon, right? You've got a pork roast, and then it's pork roast.
Yeah.
You've got a turkey for Thanksgiving. It's a turkey. So you're right. Every one gives off a very distinct odor, doesn't it?
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And so our game is to identify those molecules. When we have something here, we do that in a mass spectrometer. We isolate them in gas, and you can understand the characteristics, and then match them with molecules in plants. It's fun. But it's also like one of those combination games where like there's so many different iterations, it's hard to find the exact one. And so that takes a lot of time and trial and error, and sort of you can get it almost right, but you're not there yet, and then you can sway farther away as you try to get closer, and then bring it back. And so there's a lot of more effort required there. But the one that I find the hardest is a color transition. And so color transition and this is a difference between us and some other companies, is that we don't allow any genetic modification. There's no GMOs here at all, right? And why we do that is really out of, I think, it's respect for the consumer in the sense that, so my kids eat this every day or very frequently, and I want American families and globally families to have it every day. I don't want to burden them with that sense of, I don't know exactly what this is. It's never been in the food supply before, and have 10 years from now some sort of story come out that, hey, it actually turned out it's not good for you, right? So
just avoid that.
Yeah, we just avoid it. Don't it's already complicated enough to explain to someone. Okay, meat comes primarily, or historically rather, from an animal, but we can actually build it right from plants. That's a message that we want to focus on, not and we've used all this science, and so they could. I'm pointing back to our labs here. They could do it much more quickly. If I allowed genetic modification, but I think that's not a good decision for our brand. And so finding things in nature that go from red to black and gray under a 4-minute period each side of being cooked is really hard. There's some obvious ones, like take a bite out of an apple, you set the apple on the table, it oxidizes, starts to brown. Okay, so we pull that out of the apple, right? Pomegranate has some elements to it. Certain teas have some element to it, but you got to find that right combination and then get it to behave in the right way over a very, very strict spectrum. So that's hard.
So let me say that. So my son, Cole, 12, had a bunch of his buddies over for his birthday.
Yeah.
And he wanted to have the Beyond Meat burgers for all of his buddies.
Okay.
And so I made them on the grill.
Right.
And I was absolutely blown away by how it performed like a burger, right? Dripping through the grill, hits, it kind of blows up. I'll tell you, the thing that was most, my biggest problem was the smell.
Yeah.
For some reason, it's got a smell that is, I find, to be a little off-putting.
Yeah. Now, do you know which version you were using? Was it the older version? When was this?
This was probably six to 8 months ago.
That's the older version. So the aroma was one of the things we were really working on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was interesting was that to get the taste that we had, That aroma was kind of a burden we had to deal with. The new one doesn't have that.
Wow.
And so that's what's so neat about this whole development process is, and we hear that. We would hear that from consumers. Like there's something about the aroma that they didn't like.
Yeah.
So, but we couldn't just take it out because it would impact the flavor.
Yeah.
So, but now we were able to do that. And so we just keep making it better.
I mean, imagine when, you got the aroma right. I mean, everything else, and it performs. I mean, wow.
But so you get the nutrition. The second piece was
Yep.
nutrition, right? And so we need to deliver the benefits of animal protein. And again, you guys have been brilliant on this. That, it's not a good delivery mechanism for protein, right? That's the main point, right? Because it comes with the heme iron and all the other things that people want to avoid, right? But you can't say there's no benefit to meat, right? There's protein in meat, right? And so we want to deliver the benefits, the amino acids, et cetera, but without any of the downside of animal protein, right? And that's the game. So how do we figure out how to deliver all of the benefits? Make sure we don't have anything like, obviously no cholesterol, no heme iron, nothing that would stimulate insulin-like growth factor, all these other things, right? So keep all of that out. And then the third piece is, let's not screw around on price. Like if we really want to make this a global phenomenon and to help people transition as a generation away from animal protein toward plant protein and plant-based meat, let's figure out a way to drop the price of this below that of animal protein. And it's interesting, when Bill Gates invested in, I think, 2012.
And how did that happen? I mean, do you pick up the phone and call Bill Gates, or I mean, did you get introduced, or how did that happen?
Yeah, it was through an introduction. I have a very fortunate to have a mentor named Ray Lane, and so Ray he's at Great Point Ventures now, but at the time he was at Kleiner, and he and someone named Amol Deshpande connected me to Gates, and it was funny. The first discussion with him, I was very anxious, because he's a formidable guy.
Sure.
It's Bill Gates, and he couldn't have been nicer. Like super nice.
And so you met with him for what, an hour or so? And then was he like, I like you, I like what you're doing, I'm in?
It was a little longer than that. The diligence was like amazing. Yeah, the diligence was extremely disciplined and long process. He was very, did a ton of research on us, and then ultimately invested. But his one of the things he said, which I still follow, is to go global as quick as you can, and to drop the price below animal protein as quick as you can. And I think both of those are spot on.
And have you successfully gone global?
So we're in 64 different countries today, but
is that global then?
It
sounds pretty global to me.
It has some good features to it, but to me, it's not where I need to be. That's through export, and I really need to be producing in those countries, in the main parts of the world. Like I need to be set up with production in the EU, set up with production in Asia, and so we are. In the first quarter of next year, we'll have production in the Netherlands, which I'm really excited about, and we're looking pretty aggressively at Asia right now.
Jeez.
You got to, because it doesn't make sense to ship all this stuff around the world, and I want to be in those markets underpricing animal protein in those markets to the extent that I can.
What keeps you up at night?
Right.
And I can remember your answer back then if you want me to
Yeah, sure. Trigger me, 'cause a lot. It could be different.
Yeah. Well, I think I remember you saying, you know what, I feel like, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Yes. Yeah. There's competition coming for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people coming after us. And we fought so hard to get in the position we're in that I don't want to cede that to anybody. I want this group, this very special group that's been working here for a long time, to be that group that leads this charge, and so I feel very good about that. But the thing that really keeps me up is, I feel this is a window of opportunity available to both you and me, in terms of just being able to, this message that we care so deeply about, for people to be able to hear it, and I don't want to squander that. It's like a moment in time, right? And how do we make good on this moment in time, where all the work we've done for so long can be realized?
Yeah.
And a misstep could hurt us. Just not fully executing against the amazing opportunity ahead of us is something that I think about every day. How can we grow more quickly? How can we be more aggressive? How can we get this product to more people?
Yeah. No, I look at the work that my father's been doing, Colin Campbell, Dean Ornish, these guys, John McDougall. They've been in the trenches since, late 70s, early 80s. Yeah. And for these guys, I mean, I can't imagine how exciting it must be that to see everything come to fruition.
And it didn't have to happen that way. You know what I mean? Like there's so many, I've always said this, that technology, it's a slightly different concept, but technology has no regard for your career. It's going to happen when it happens. Look at solar in the 70s in Germany and things like that. Boomed, and then all of a sudden went away, right?
Yeah.
And so we just got to make sure that we are careful stewards of all this.
You've got a different approach than the Impossible Burger.
Sure.
Can you speak to that for a sec?
Yeah, and I think there is a lot of confusion in the market
Yeah.
between us and Impossible, and we're both working toward the same goal. And so there's a lot of shared respect there in terms of what they're trying to do and what we're trying to do. But there are really important differences, and I've said that before publicly, that it's really a battle place of ideas. It's which idea is going to have the most legs, the longest over the most amount of time, and for us, that decision not to go GMOs, I think it really was an important one, and I feel really strongly about that. It's something that our consumers are very, I think, appreciative of. I think the use of heme iron, regardless of my own thoughts about it, right? Is going
and Impossible has some heme iron in it, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And there's controversy around that.
Sure.
And I just wanted to stay clear of that.
Yeah.
I didn't want to burden the brand with that.
And they even mentioned heme iron in the Game Changers.
They do,
right?
and so that's some of the headwinds that they're going to face
Yeah.
as a result. And so I think and it'll be challenging for them because I think so much of their business is built around that concept, right?
Yeah. And they also have soy, right?
They use soy. So when you start a company without venture money, and you know this very well, you do friends and family, and you run out of your own money, and you start just having to rely on revenue. And so, if you didn't listen to the consumer before, you sure as hell listened to it then, right? Listen to the consumer then. And so I did. And I was in the aisles of Whole Foods myself, always trying to gain feedback from the consumer. And I loved this, like where it was just direct feedback. And the consumer did say, don't use soy. And they said, we have too much wheat in our diet already. Don't use GMOs. And so I had both the benefit and the burden of really having to hustle in the beginning to get this product to move. So I learned a lot, and I kept those with me. Staying away from soy, staying away from wheat, staying away from GMOs. There's a lot of elegance, and you can raise a lot of money around, kind of a new and novel GMO solution. But American families have to be comfortable eating this, and my own family has to be comfortable eating it. And I wouldn't have felt comfortable if I had GMOs.
You mentioned Whole Foods,
Yep.
and if I'm not mistaken, you got your launch in some of the Whole Foods stores in, I think, Rocky Mountain region. So they were your first partnership as far as getting the Beyond Meat burger to consumers, and that must have really informed your decision as far as...
They went so deep with us for so long. So I started working with them in 2009 in the Mid-Atlantic region, and a woman named Louise Liu in their prepared food section, who worked for someone named Peter Howell. And I wouldn't be here today without Whole Foods. I mean, absolutely kept the doors open.
I wouldn't either.
Yeah. I mean, they're a great partner. And I remember I'd come from this industry, the automotive industry, where the way big OEMs treated suppliers was brutal. Just beat them down. Whole Foods never did that to me. They were always supportive. They came to the university when we were doing a lot of development work and offered solutions. I was looking for something to avoid using wheat, and Louise says, "Hey, why don't you use amaranth?" And so that was my first product. Had a lot of amaranth in it, and so they were just great. And then fast forward 6 years, and Tom Rich says, "You know what? You guys are ready. I'll put you in the meat case." Tom Rich is in the Rocky Mountain region. So I mean, I'm really, regardless of Mackey's recent comments, I'm still a huge fan of Whole Foods.
Yeah. Well, speaking, so Mackey's comments, I believe are, something like it may be great for the environment and all that, but is it healthier than a beef burger? Yeah. I think you've kind of, laid out some reasons why it is, right?
So I mean, we should unpack that for a second. I mean, it is interesting. There's a how to say this? So sometimes people will put the processed label on our products, which I understand it is a process. It goes through a process. But if you're a mainstream American consumer, the meat that you're consuming is processed already. Yeah. And that's the distinction I want to help people make, is that, depending on the species will have, been exposed to antibiotics, hormones, veterinary drugs, dioxin, all these things that ultimately, unfortunately, often make their way into the food supply, right? And so that's a process to me. And then you go to our process, and we're pulling the protein directly from the plant, and it's being separated from fiber by changing the pH level in water. It's dried, and then it's sent through a system of heating, cooling, and pressure that if you've had pasta, you've had something that's gone through that system.
Yeah.
So we just have to educate the consumer, right? It's not an unprocessed food. It is a process, but is it better than the current process for making meat? And my argument would be it is. The other piece about transparency, you're welcome to come to our facilities at any time, knock on the door, we'll give you a tour. You don't need to call in advance.
Wow.
I'm very proud of our process, but I would ask you to do the same thing of a meat company.
Right.
See what happens.
Well, I think if you look at the ingredient list in a burger, I mean, it's pretty exhaustive.
Yeah. And imagine if I had to break that down
Yeah.
by constituent part like we do.
Have you ever had a recall? I mean,
No.
Can your products get tainted, so to speak?
They could, but so could lettuce. I mean, there's
Right.
nothing inherent in them like animal protein.
Right.
Yeah.
What about shelf life? Shelf life any different than like a regular?
It's funny. It's
beef
a
burger?
little bit longer than a regular beef burger, but I really don't encourage people to let it slack out in the fridge for 7-8 days. You certainly can, but
Right.
I like it right after it's been thawed out.
So every time I've seen you, you're always wearing pretty much kind of almost like what I wear, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Sneakers, jeans,
Yeah.
a t-shirt.
Yeah.
You wear a cap. I don't wear
Yeah.
a cap.
Yeah.
Is this your work outfit?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I had to wear a suit for a long time in my career, and I was really glad not to. Yeah,
So you
anymore.
say, I mean, good riddance to suits?
I don't really have one that fits anymore. Yeah. so it's like, yeah.
I mean, when you rang the bell, right?
yeah.
I think you were wearing a Beyond Meat t-shirt,
yeah.
and jeans.
Yeah. I mean, it's so fun to think about all that. Like it's
Just bucking the norm.
well, I was thinking about even just, like we used to wear wigs, right? And, stuff like that. Like, I mean, who's to say the suit needs to stick around?
Good point about the wigs. Boy, when was that, back in 1776?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should start wearing wigs. I feel like I'm keeping it a little formal.
Well, I want to end with, so you mentioned that your father kind of planted that seed
You did, yeah.
way back when. I would love to meet your dad.
Oh, yeah, we're going to do it this spring.
Yeah.
We'll do it this spring.
What in the world does he think of what you've done with that seed that he planted way back when?
Well, I'd love to, for you and me and both of our dads, which we're so blessed to have in our lives, I mean, to get together, and I'd like to ask the same question to your dad. I mean, he's just incredible what you've done, and I think he's proud. I was with him the other day, and I wrote him a note and left it on his desk, just thanking him for everything, because he works so hard, and he's an academic, still teaching at McGill, and it just, my relationship with him means a lot. It with both of my parents means a lot. That quote that you had about New Dawn for agriculture,
Yeah.
that is actually a message to him. That is, I paraphrased that. Thoreau wasn't talking about this, but he talks about a new dawn, and it's just dawn is just our awakening hour. That's a quote from Walden, and that's my middle name, which my dad gave me, and so I slipped that in there. He just means a lot to me. Yeah,
I can tell.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, this has been awesome.
Thanks, man.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's
I
great.
look forward to playing together in the future
Yeah.
in a multitude of ways.
Yeah. Can I do your quote? It's that simple.
It's that simple.
No, I can't. I'm just I really
Yeah.
appreciate being interviewed by you. You're one of my heroes. So thank you.
Oh
Yeah.
man, thank you. And again, this season 2, it's the heart of a hero.
Let's do it.
People that are changing the game. You are doing it like lights out.
Thanks, man.
Spades.
Let's go.
Thank you, my plant strong brother.
Let's do it. Thanks.
Peace. Engine 2.
Let's do it.
Keep it plant strong.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.
Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Ethan, my man, for your ongoing intensity, passion, and commitment for making this planet that much better. With your efforts, we can be the first generation to separate meat from animals. How cool would that be? Forks Over Knives and the Game Changers got the message to our living rooms, but Ethan, you're getting it into our kitchens. But as the old cliche goes, the proof is in the pudding. But with Beyond Meat, the proof is on the plate. The Plant Strong podcast team includes Lori Kordowich, Amy Mackey, Patrick Gavin, Wade Clark, and Carrie Barrett. I want to thank my parents, Dr. Caldwell B. Esselstyn Jr. and Ann Kryle Esselstyn, for creating a legacy that will be carried on for generations and being willing to go against the current and trudge upstream to the causation. We are all better for it.